Hey guys, OCB Communications, welcome back to another review, this time of Basket Case 2. Look who's back in the basket again. Basket Case 2, which is the sequel to Basket Case as a 1990 film. Basket Case is a 1982 movie. This is a sequel that came out 8 years after the first film. It takes place pretty much directly after the events of the first film were left off. Um, and Basket Case 2, now, this is going to be an interesting review for me to do because I'm kind of on the fence with this movie. Now, this is actually the first Basket Case movie I saw was Basket Case 2. That was the one that was introduced to first. I think I rented it a long time ago and saw it. And it's been such a long time that that when I watched it again, it felt like the first time. And Basket Case 2 is one of those movies that it's not necessarily a necessary sequel, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a really entertaining, fun movie. And it's definitely a Henenlotter film. It's definitely a very strange, surreal flick. Um, this one is taken a little bit less seriously than the first movie. The first movie is not serious, but the first movie had some serious moments. I didn't feel there were any moments like that whatsoever in this movie. This is more camp. This is more um, kind of being a little bit more off the wall and strange and weird. And to be honest, Frank Henenlotter only made the movie because he wanted to secure funding for Frankenhooker. And Superior Glickenhaus Entertainment, who financed this movie and released it, they wanted a franchise on their hands. So they thought, why not create Basket Case? We know it's a really popular movie on home video. Let's create a Basket Case franchise. And Henenlotter originally, he didn't even really want to have Dwayne uh, have as big of a role in this film as he ultimately did. He wanted to just be a cameo role with Kevin Van Hentenryck, and he just did Hentenryck. I think that's how you Kevin Van Hentenryck. So he just wanted him as a cameo role, and he wanted the rest of the movie just to be focusing on the House of Freaks, with Granny Ruth and so forth. And he even wanted to call it House of Freaks. But Shapiro Glickenhaus wanted a franchise, so they basically convinced him to do a sequel to Basket Case, and he agreed to do it because, House of Freaks is going to be a sequel to Basket Case, but anyway, he more of a true sequel. He agreed to do it because it wasn't a complete rehash of the original. It wasn't just a remake. And that's another reason why I guess he liked doing the film. But the main reason why Henenlotter did Basket Case 2 was so he would get the funding to do Frankenhooker, a project he was really, really, really passionate about. And it shows. I'm not saying that there's no passion with Basket Case 2, but you can tell that this is just to me it feels kind of rushed for me personally. It feels rushed. It's got bits and pieces that work and pieces that don't, and it's a movie that's why I'm divided upon it. I'm torn. I'm like it's very entertaining. I enjoyed it. I had a fun time watching it, but there are things about it that just doesn't come close to achieving the sleazy charm of the original, and it loses the sleaze. There's only a few moments where it has that. It feels a little bit too clean cut. It feels a little bit. It's not as gritty as the first movie. It's honestly one of the safest films I've seen Henenlotter direct. Interestingly enough, it's still a strange, weird movie, and it's got its fair share of weird shit going on in it. But when you compare this to Frankenhooker or compare it to um, the first Basket Case or Brain Damage, this is honestly kind of it's there, but it's just, I wouldn't consider it one of his best. I really wouldn't. And it's kind of a letdown. I kind of felt a little bit let down with this sequel. I really loved the first movie, and I wanted to see how the story would continue. And I was willing to put past the ridiculousness of Dwayne and Belial surviving their fall, because I'm like, okay, they didn't fall at the Empire State Building, so okay, all right. So I was willing to deal with that. But when it became more of just focusing on Granny Ruth's House of Freaks, which looks like, which were good effects by Gabe Bartalos and company, um, great makeup effects, but I didn't really care for the Freaks characters. I didn't find them necessarily that engaging. I didn't find them funny, and I thought the movie kind of lost a little bit of the heart that the first movie had. I mean, the reason why I liked the first Basket Case so much is because I felt sympathetic for the two leads, for Belial and Dwayne. This becomes trying to feel sympathetic for the Freaks, which I do in a sense, but they're so over the top and silly that they make Belial look real. I mean, Belial is, over the top and nothing you've ever seen before. But I don't know. Belial seems downright realistic compared to the freaks in this movie. Like a frog man, and, a guy with 27 noses, and, a guy whose worms falling out of growing out of his face. I mean, that's, and there's also a female Belial type creature named Eve. So Belial gets his love story. I get and the very uncomfortable, just weird, just disturbing sex scene between Eve and Belial, and near the end of the movie, which is I guess is supposed to be funny, and I did chuckle a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know what it was. I disagree with Joe Bob Briggs, who said it's perfect. Perfect. This is far from a perfect movie. I think it's a step down from the original, and I'm not saying that Basket Case 2 sucks. It doesn't suck. The moments where it does it does a good job with it. I mean, the ending was sufficiently shocking. I didn't see it coming. I thought it was a good twist. Um, More than a couple good twists at the end. I don't know if the film actually earned the ending that it got, but okay, I could deal with that. Um, this is definitely a sequel that's lacking in the gore department. I don't know why. It's definitely sufficiently less gory than the first movie. There's barely any blood in there's a few blood and a little bit of blood here and there. There's a good makeup effect. There's a good death scene at the end for the reporter lady, um, when she gets her head pulled up and ripped in half, and I was like, oh, now you're one of us. Now you're one of the freaks. Um, and there's sufficiently moments of humor and fun moments in the film. It's just I found myself not giving a shit about the freak subplot. I didn't care about Granny Ruth and her band of freaks. That's not what I came to watch a Basket Case movie for. When I'm watching a Basket Case film, I came to see Belial and Dwayne. And I didn't come to see Granny Ruth and her group of freaks that look like they walked off the set of Freaked. I mean, I don't come to a Basket Case movie for that. And it's not that it's bad. I mean, it's just not what I expected. It's not what I wanted. And it just screams that once again it's kind of a sequel that didn't need to be made. But it was made for a reason, so Henenlotter could get the funding for Frankenhooker. So in that regard, good. I'm glad it was made. I guess there was a necessary reason why Basket Case 2 was made. And I know a lot of people like this movie. A lot of people love it. Some people like it more than the first movie. That's cool. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying I think it's not nearly as good as the first movie, in my opinion. I think it just lost a lot of the the exploitation, gritty, sleazy, fun that the first movie had. And you could, I mean, yes, it's more polished looking. It's more slick. It's because it has a bigger budget. It has a $2.5 million budget, and compared to the $33,000 that Henenlotter had to work with for the first film. But because of the higher budget, it loses something. I don't like the redesign of Belial. He looks completely different. I mean, I guess it's all right. I wouldn't say I hate it. I'd say the redesign of Belial is all right. It definitely looks a lot different than the design from the first film. Um, I didn't mind the whole aspect of Eve, the female Belial, like creature, um, deformity. I didn't mind that, and I've had some of the performances. Kevin Van Hentenryck comes back and does a good job, even though I don't understand why he just flips his lid and goes crazy at the end of the movie. I really don't understand it. It's not really clarified very well. I don't like the fact um, that it just completely ignores the spat that Belial and Dwayne had, at the end of the first movie. It just acts like it never happened. Yeah, yeah. Belial grabbed Dwayne by the balls and threw it, and basically took them both out a window over jealousy, and that's not even mentioned at all in this movie. Um, I like the callback to the first movie. You had the the character from one of the first what's her name? She was in the first film, and Casey, played by Beverly Bonner, has a fun little cameo in the beginning of the movie. Like the movie takes place right up from the beginning of the first film. I mean, the ending of the first movie, the beginning, the ending, and it's Dwayne and Belial become media sensations, and then they get in the hospital, and they survive their fall, and then Belial and Dwayne end up escaping from the hospital, and then they get helped out by a friend of the family, Granny Ruth, who was a friend of his aunt's, and they Granny Ruth and her daughter, I believe, played by Heather Rattray, plays Susan. Is her daughter, and they rescue Belial and Dwayne and take them to their home, which is a home for freaks. And Belial ends up liking it there, but Dwayne wants to leave. He wants to get out of there. He doesn't want to live with a bunch of freaks. He wants to be normal, and he wants to take Susan along with him because he likes her. And much like the character from the first movie, but by Susan Terry Smith, and respectively Sharon, you know, he wants to go away with her, but he wants to talk to Belial first about it. Belial ends up laughing at him in a weird scene, which I guess is part of his psychosis or not. I don't know what's going on. And then there's a subplot that gets carried in where there's this reporter lady who's actually played a really gorgeous actress, um, Kathryn Meisle, who plays Marcy. And you have a brief cameo by Ted Sorel, who plays Phil, one of the private investigator, detective guy, who's put on the case, try to find after Marcy discovers that Dwayne is at Granny Ruth's house, and she's trying to do a story for her tabloid, whatever paper or newspaper story. She's a journalist. She's a story about the anniversary of the twins, the monster twins, Dwayne and Belial, and she wants to get the scoop on the story. So she takes a photographer with her. They go to the Granny's house. Um, she goes checks out Granny's house first. Granny tells her to go away. That's when Dwayne shows up, and she realizes that she recognizes him and the basket that he's carrying. So then she goes in and tells her boss about the story. He sends a photographer with her. They go back to the house. And this is at the point where Granny Ruth has decided to band together her group of freaks, along with the help of Dwayne and Belial, to take out the reporter lady and anybody who gets in their way, so they can basically kill these people so they can continue their way of life unabated and without being persecuted. And I didn't mind the performance by Granny Ruth, Annie Ross. She had a lot of fun with it. You could tell that she had fun with the performance. Um, I like the scene where she first takes Belial up to the attic and introduces him to the attic full of freaks. And I like this line of dialogue. And she's also kind of like a psychiatrist to Belial. Says like, I think it's time we really confronted your feelings about your separation from Dwayne. To you, it was more than losing a brother. You also lost a piece of yourself. And then I also like the whole line that she has, which is a nice, fun little bit of dark humor here, where she's like, "I understand your pain, Belial, but ripping the faces off people may not be in your best interest." And I also like the scene where she goes in and the sideshow Barker guy, who pretty much that's as close as the film gets to recapturing the sleaze that the first movie has, and I like that scene. And that's when the reporter lady realizes there's something up. And I like it because it shows that Granny's going around. She hates carnival barkers. You're trying to use these freaks, and treat them badly and use them as, sideshow acts for money. And there's an interesting sort of dynamic there. It kind of reminds me of Todd Browning's Freaks, 1930s film. It's a very weird, surreal movie. This is definitely a more tongue-in-cheek, definitely a B-movie version of Todd Browning's Freaks. Um, the same guy who directed Dracula with Bela Lugosi directed Freaks. There's a lot of similarities between this movie and that film. I'd probably say I prefer Todd Browning's Freaks over Basket Case 2. But like I was saying, I like the whole aspect where she's trying to stick up for these freaks and whatever. All right, and then you do sympathize with their plight, but then sometimes it just goes overboard with the ridiculousness. Like a mouth that can sing opera. That's it. It's just a mouth that can sing opera. And the frog guy, frog man, and all this kind of stuff. You're like, okay, really, this is going far beyond normal sideshow freaks. This has gone into fantasy territory. But good makeup effects by Gabe Bartalos. But anyway, going back to what the plot is, the last half of the movie is Granny Ruth and her family of freaks, along with the help of Belial and Dwayne, stop the reporter lady and the photographer. This photographer guy comes in the house, tries to, get a picture of Belial. And I like this scene a lot. I think it's really well shot. It's ingenious, using the camera flashes while Belial and the freaks are attacking this poor guy. The thing is, though, the freaks really don't do that much. They're just there. They just hang around the attic for a while and then maybe do one or two things. Actually, they don't do anything. Belial's the one that does all of the killing. It does everything. I think Dwayne does a couple things too, but that's it. They don't do anything except show up and look weird. That's really it. The freaks don't do much of anything in this movie. So it's kind of almost like, why are they in this movie and what is the point? Just to be entertaining and to be different and for Frank Henenlotter to make his House of Freaks movie? Okay, all right, I guess. But they don't really serve that much of a purpose other than, hey, Belial and Dwayne, you're not alone. There's people like you. And that's really about it. And that's part of the reason why I'm conflicted on this movie, because I could easily do without these freaks. I'm fine with my one freak. I'm fine with my one freak that is Belial. I can appreciate him despite his flaws, and I can understand why he wanted to kill the doctors. I would have wanted to get revenge too. You feel for this deformity, this deformed, part of a human being. There's some humanity within Belial. When you look at these freaks, there's none of that humanity, except for Eve, who has a human face, much like Belial does. All the other ones, I don't feel for the frog man. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Or the gargoyle that sits on top of the house that's made out of stone and can eat food. I don't really. I mean, that's the problem. That goes way overboard with it. The point, it just becomes silly and it kind of like looks like stuff you'd see out of Hell Comes to Frog Town or Return of the Swamp Thing. And okay, there's a place for that, but I'm not the biggest fan of the freaks in this movie. And plus, they don't do anything. They have a cool scene where they go up against Ted Sorel, who I really liked in From Beyond, and and he's a private eye guy. He's a detective guy, and a really cool scene I liked where they are all wearing these masks and they turn around and he's trying to act like, oh, what am I in a room with a bunch of freaks? I'm not in a room with a bunch of freaks. I'm not gonna be in a room with a bunch of freaks. And then the whole thing where it's like, how many of you are a freak? Yay! It's like, what? And he's like, what the hell is what's your name? What the hell's going on here? Oh, what the hell is going on here? Wants to know a couple of things. I thought that was pretty fun. I had fun with that scene. And then like I said, the photographer death. I like the way that was shot, but and the way that this scene was shot too, where Ted Sorel gets his comeuppance. Belial ends up killing him in a storeroom. I thought that was pretty well shot as well. Um, then after that, then the freaks and Belial and Dwayne turn their attention to Marcy, and I like the scene where they confront her in her apartment, and I like this line of dialogue where Dwayne is talking to her about he was really excited for the interview. He figured you could ask him a few questions, get to know him a little bit. Then he could rip your face off. No big deal. I like that. I like that scene. I like the whole thing where it's like, where is he? He's just running around. He's not in the basket. I let him out earlier. He's probably hiding. And I like the whole thing where it's like, he looks at another basket and he's like, what's in the basket? And she actually goes in and opens it, and Belial comes out and attacks her. And she gets her face stretched, and that's when they have that really decent effect by the effects guys. That's where they say, oh, Marcy, you're one of us now. You're one of the freaks. And then after that, the freaks and Granny Ruth, the rest of the freaks, Dwayne and Belial, they have a barbecue, and then Susan goes in to check on Dwayne because she's worried about him. They end up making out. He ends up getting this is all cut in with the scenes of Belial and Eve banging, I guess. Which is really fucking weird and fucked up. Um, and that's an image there's a lot of, I mean, Frankenhooker had a lot of those fucked up images too. But, honestly, even more fucked up images than Belial banging some other, banging Eve. But anyway, so Dwayne is making out with Susan. I almost said Sharon. No, it was Susan, and then she was, no, stop, 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 stop. I can't, I'm pregnant. It's like, I've been pregnant for 6 years. It's like, 6 years? What? It's like, it's like, look, just don't be afraid. And then out of nowhere, some fucking monster with like sharp teeth. It almost looks like a face hugger or something with like an even more like a clam head with teeth. And it goes, and then sometimes he needs to come back up for air, and then Dwayne freaks out and he's like, no, it's like, wait, look at me, Dwayne, look at me, it's like, no, 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 because he thought she was normal like him, because really all he has is a scar. And that's what I thought too. I thought Eve came from her. And I think that is the case, because I think the face that's used for Eve is her face. So why does she also have to be pregnant with some monster baby thing? I don't really, that pops in and out of her stomach like a jack in the box. It was just really weird, and just, I don't know what to say about that. And then Dwayne flips out and knocks her out the window and kills her, which I was like, wow, okay, I didn't see that coming. And then Granny Ruth gets upset and sends the freaks after him. He's upset. It's like, why can't I love anybody? Have love. Why can't I? And Dwayne loses it and goes after Belial after he's finished. And then he ends up knocking him out with a baseball bat. And then he ends up, end of the movie is Dwayne sewing Belial back onto his side, and accepting that he's a freak, and he reunited his brother with him, so they're no longer separated, which makes Okay, that's unique and different, but then it ruins the separation anxiety aspect of the first movie, and it's what makes it such an interesting sort of dynamic, and just sewing him back on. Okay, all right. It's just that just the decision making that Dwayne did, how he shifted from I want to be normal to I'm a freak. Was this really really abrupt for me, and yeah, the ending was one of those things where I just was scratching my head like, huh, huh, and then Belial ends up and then Eve ends up having babies, so you have that, which is which ultimately leads to Basket Case 3, The Progeny, which I will check out pretty soon. But yeah, that's Basket Case 2. I really don't know what to say about Basket Case 2, except that there are some moments that work. I like the moments with Dwayne and Belial. The effects are really well done by Gabe Bartolos and company. The score by Joe Renzetti is really, really, I thought was really good. The little bits and pieces that you heard. Um, I didn't mind some of the. I thought the cast overall was really solid. Ted Sorel had a nice cameo. Um, Annie Ross was fun as Granny Ruth. Kathryn Meisle I thought was good as Marcy, the reporter. Heather Rattray was good as Susan. I once again the ending. I don't think she needed to die, and I don't think she needed to have a monster baby that pops out of her stomach like a Jack in the Box. Once again, like it's like Basket Case, the first movie had a lot going for it enough as it was that the ending I could deal with. I would have preferred a little bit better of an ending, but I can still deal with the movie. Basket Case 2 is one of those films where there's really not that much that I really highly honestly would love to say that the ending works. I mean, if the ending ended where I'm a freak too, we both had twins, and Eve is part of her is a part of her, then I would like that. And then that would make sense. That they'd be the perfect couple for each other. And they're still freaks, but they're unique in that way. Not random, like I got a monster in my pocket or a monster in my stomach. I don't really understand that. Don't get that one. And then she dies. And it's kind of like anybody that Kevin Van Hentenryck's character loves, they die, and I wasn't asking for a happy, happy, happy ending because it never would be because they murdered a bunch of people, but still, I mean, something, and the ending is just I don't know. I'm scratching my head about this stuff. Belial's no longer separated, and he was pretty much. It's a repeat of what happened in the first movie. It's just backwards. Belial was now reattached to his brother without his will. Against his will. His own brother reattached him to his side against his will. It's like it's a repeat of the problem that led to the revenge that Belial did with the doctors and Dwayne helped him with in the first movie. And I just didn't really like that ending, so to speak. And I didn't like this shift in character from Dwayne, from I want to be normal to I'm just a freak now. But anyway, I really don't. And speaking of the freaks, I didn't care for the freaks. There was good effects, but they didn't do a very good job with the freaks. They didn't do much. They were just there to be weird and just be a bunch of freaks. They didn't serve much purpose to the story or to the plot, and they didn't do anything other than, oh, hi, we're here, we're freaks, and that's about it. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say about Basket Case 2 except rated out of 5 stars. I'm gonna give it 3. I think it's that much of a step down from the first movie for me personally. It's not a movie I'd probably watch multiple times over and over again. I mean, it's just it doesn't have that sleazy charm that the first movie had. It looks a little bit too slick. It looks a little bit too polished. It's not as funny as Henenlotter's other works. There's some moments that work, some moments that are humorous, that are fun, But other moments, I didn't really care, and I think it was just trying to focus on the freaks, and I didn't really care about the freaks. And I wanted the, I thought the storyline, the way the film handled the continuation of Dwayne and Belial's story, I don't think it was handled very well. And so yeah, I really, and it also, if you're into gore and you really like the movie for the first movie for the gore, you don't get that much gore at all in this one. It's very, very cut down in Basket Case 2. There's a few moments here and there, but it's definitely not nearly as bloody as the first movie. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say about Basket Case 2, except at the end of the day, I thought it was alright. It was entertaining, it was alright, but it was just something about it that I just couldn't, it was not as endearing to me as the first movie. And that's just my opinion on Basket Case 2. I know there's a lot of people who've disagreed. Go right ahead. I don't know what I think it was the freak thing that I did not care for being added into the story, and the fact that Dwayne and Belial's story, the way it was carried out and the way it ended, I didn't really didn't. It was not satisfying at all. It just felt forced, or just Henenlotter trying to shock the audience more than really giving these characters the ending to their story, to their tale that they deserve. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say about Basket Case 2 except thanks for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.